Hey, it's Roy Newgate, and I hope everyone's having a great start to the year. Since the official translation for One Piece Chapter 1000 is out now, I decided to switch things up and do a chapter review. Now, going in, I expected it to be a rather lengthy chapter and one that would include stuff from the outside world and something similar to the reviews that we got in Chapter 50, 100, and 500. Although that didn't come into fruition, I can't say I was disappointed, as this chapter did a lot for the story in terms of moving the plot forward and putting us right in the fight against the Yonko. There's no more setup stages, and we're finally here. I feel like Oda has also gotten a lot of pressure off his shoulders with this chapter release, as he can go at whatever pace he deems suitable from this point forward. In the beginning of the chapter, we see Luffy meets with the Minks, and Shishilian tells Luffy that they have cleared the way for him to reach the roof, and this reminds Luffy that this is what the Minks are about, putting their lives on the line for their friends. He tells him about this and says he hasn't forgotten what happened on Zou and what they did for Raizo, and with Luffy showing this sort of recognition and gratitude, we can see how emotional it makes Shishilian. Moving along to King and Queen's attempt to impede Marco and Zoro, we see that they're shocked at Marco's power, outright calling him invincible because he seemingly takes no damage despite whatever attacks they throw at him. And Marco proceeds to place them both in a headlock simultaneously, much to their shock, while throwing Zoro to a roof with his talons. I enjoy this part of the chapter the most because it just goes to show that Marco is quite literally built different. I feel like among some fans he doesn't get enough credit and sometimes gets disrespected despite how good his portrayal is. Now, you may ask, how is Marco able to do this to a YC1 and a YC2 or whatever? But, like I've said previously, these fan-made power levels and commander levels just don't exist in the story, and they're just fan-made terms in their entirety, with everyone possessing different skill sets. So for me, this reinforces the idea that Marco is a level above the likes of King and Katakuri. But I feel like even then, Marco's power is such an anomaly that it's hard to figure out where to place him, as we have no idea what his limits are at this point. But if you want an in-depth analysis on his abilities, Dice Sage did a video on him, so feel free to check it out, as the link will be in the description. Now, when it comes to Zoro, I did expect him to fight King before eventually meeting Kaido, but in hindsight, I must admit that may have been a bit unrealistic given where we are now. In any case, I'm glad to see he's gotten to the roof and can start off the fight alongside everyone else. Now, when it comes to King, I see a lot of people talking about him, saying, oh, he's a lot weaker than we thought, he's not on Katakuri's level and stuff like that, but, I'm not going to overblow this when it comes to King. I think the big difference between King and Kat is the fact that Katakuri had dozens of chapters of build up, and he was the focus for I think it was close to 14 chapters where he got to fight Luffy and got full exposition. King, on the other hand, has to take a backseat to two Yonko, who are the main focus of the arc, as well as the Toby Roppo. They're also a factor, and all these other elements of the arc. So I don't think it's fair to downplay King as a result. And also, I feel like the dynamic between Big Mom and Kaido and whatever difference of strength you see between them, or if none exists, I think that same thing also applies to King and Katakuri because their crews are they mirror each other to the point where their strongest subordinates should be pretty much equal to each other or interchangeable. And if you were to ask me, how would Cat fare in this situation, I think the same exact thing happens to him. I don't think this is a knock on King at all, So it's just Marco is on another level, as I stated before. Next, we see the continuation of the conversation between Momonosuke and Yamato, in which they begin to discuss the contents of Oden's journal. One of the most important points is the fact that it confirms that the young powerful pirates that were brought up in prior chapters when talking about what would take place in these 20 years were in fact the members of the worst generation. We go back to Yamato and Ace's discussion, and we have yet again another teaser of what Luffy said to his brothers in the ASL flashback. And we are reminded that it mirrors what Roger said to Oden and Whitebeard in their first meeting, and of course, as we saw, that was what ultimately pushed Oden to sail with Roger, as he felt this sense of inspiration immediately after hearing those words. Personally, I can't even begin to imagine what was so compelling that either of the two could have said to evoke this sort of response. Of course, reaching Raftel is one thing that links Luffy and Roger, but again we're reminded that there is something else even more mysterious that adds to this parallel, the nature of which I feel like isn't set to be revealed until the very end of the series. Now we see Luffy is the last one to show up, it seems, and if we look closely we see that they're all staring at him as he makes his entrance. Everyone except for Zoro, that is, who is staring straight ahead. I would imagine that he has his focus squarely on Kaido, and the fact that this part of the panel is in grayscale may also hold some significance. Following this, we have this incredible double spread of the five supernova all standing across from the two emperors. I thought it was pretty cool how Law was seated on the rock as well. I got goosebumps imagining how epic this would look when Toei gets to work on animating it, and immediately started wondering which track would fit it the most. It's also emphasized again that these are the powerful pirates to take down Kaido that Odin talked about in his journal. And personally, I hope it remains this way, with this 5 on 2. Because if you add anybody else to the equation, I feel like it takes away from how big of a feat defeating Kaido is for this 5, especially if you throw in someone like Marco. I feel like that's overkill at this point. All things considered, of course. For dozens and dozens of chapters, most of us have been trying to piece it all together and figure out how many people will be needed to take on these two. Some even saying it's impossible without an ass pull or what have you. I even heard ideas suggesting that Kaido by himself can defeat the entire alliance, but I'm sure we all realize now that not even Kaido's previously seemingly insurmountable stature can trump the power of plot progression. These 5 are not the same 5 that started the arc. They're much more powerful now and much better prepared for this challenge. Specifically, there's Killer, who a lot of people even figure would not participate in this fight for whatever reason. I must say, even I underestimated his power in the past to some extent, but the fact that he is alongside these 4 and will have significant contributions says a lot about his ability. There's also the fact that whenever Kid's challenges or accomplishments are mentioned, we always seem to forget that he wasn't alone. Killer has been with him every step of the way. He took his losses with Kid, he fought Kaido with Kid, he was with Kid against the red-haired pirates, he was with Kid in Whole Cake Island. Because this is of course his partner, and it's not like he used up his vacation days while Kid was in the new world growing through these various trials by himself. With all that being said, I feel like it's important to say that when it comes to details like this, and perhaps I missed something or am not being open-minded enough, feel free to comment and let me know about a different angle for these sorts of discussions that may shed light on a detail of the story that I missed, whether it be power scaling or character writing. Because of course, these sorts of discussions are important for all of us to learn and get the best understanding of the story possible. Now, moving on to the next panel, we get this badass moment of Luffy walking up to the two emperors and right past them as he goes to check on Kinemon and their scabbards. Subconsciously, I thought back to Hunter x Hunter and the scene with Miriam walking past Zeno and Netero and got chills. And I'm sure a lot of other people had the same imagery in their head as well. Big Mom, I sense, has this feeling of excitement that she'll finally be able to face off against Luffy and get revenge for what transpired in Whole Cake Island. We can see how puzzled Big Mom and Kaido are to see Luffy completely ignore them though and walk right past them. I like this part of the next page where Kaido was still talking to Luffy, egging him on to tell him what he wanted to be, and we have this focus on Zoro, who hasn't taken his focus off of Kaido, and he unsheathes his sword according to the sound effects. I partly took this as Zoro being ready to attack Kaido if he tried to blindside Luffy while he was checking on his friends, which of course is something we have grown to expect from Zoro. We have the conversation between Kin and Luffy in which he expresses his shame for losing but asks him to take on his burden. Luffy asks Law to send the Scabbards down in order to get them out of harm's way, since the battle is about to start. What I find interesting about this is that Law didn't say shambles or open a room as far as we can tell, which may imply that he's grown in the last week in some capacity, so I'm more interested now to see what he's brought to the table and how he will contribute to the battle. It may be that he's increased his stamina and the effectiveness of his ability, or that he will play support using his power and strategic talents to improve their chances of winning. We saw Luffy and Zoro training with the week that they had, but for Kid, Law, and Killer we have nothing concrete to go off of, so they're sure to surprise us as well. Kaido, in the moment that Luffy was talking to Law, attempted to swing at Luffy, but he immediately dodged, and as he gets ready to counterattack with Gear 3rd, he starts thinking about the Scabbards and people of Wano, and what they have gone through, and this fuels him as he unleashes a brand new attack on Kaido. Unlike their first exchange in which he went Gear 4th but couldn't even leave a scratch on Kaido, this attack does some significant damage and leaves Kaido visibly shocked. And as we know, the issue was never the power behind Luffy's punch, but rather getting past Kaido's defense on account of his armament being a level behind what was necessary. It just goes to show how crucial the 2 weeks was. Just like Enies Lobby, they've advanced to the point where they can win. Of course, the one stark difference is that this won't be a solo fight, but by the end of this battle, I'm sure they will grow to the point where they will no longer need to fight these team battles in the future. That aside though, I think many people are rushing to put Luffy in the Admiral and Yonko territory way too soon and being a bit reactionary as he still has to grow from this battle to reach that level. By the end, I expect them all to be beaten up worse than they ever have before coming out on top. I also like the panel of Luffy putting his hat on because it mirrors Shanks in the beginning of the story. This chapter has probably left me more excited for the next more than any other chapter in Wano at this point, and I really can't wait to see what happens in 1001. My thinking is that we may actually move away from the rooftop for a minute and go back to what's going on in the floors below with the calamities and the Tobiropo. Personally, I hope this isn't the case, but there's definitely still a level of intrigue there as well. I definitely want to see how the Marco situation plays out and what the rest of the Straw Hats are up to. With that being said, we've reached the end of this review, and as always, make sure to subscribe and like the video. And also comment down below your thoughts on the chapter along with predictions for 1001.